welcome back to this week's Tuesday market review. We're going to be setting out a plan for the week ahead, try and keep it short, try and keep it under 10 minutes as usual, discuss my thoughts on BTC, on Ethereum, altcoins, and then just general other indexes that I have my eye on at the moment. You're right, so let's get into it. So first of all, obviously I'm going to talk about BTC. Right now trading under the 106 area, which we know is a very difficult place for BTC to overcome, right? We had the test of 106 back in December, back in January twice before we ended up breaking down. Over the past sort of couple days, we saw this spike up into 106, and then from there we did initially see a pretty harsh reaction. On the Sunday we saw a harsh reaction from BTC into the weekly close, and then we sold off to form like a double bottom down towards that 102,400 area. So the first time we broke into this area was always going to be a difficult place, especially since back in January was the top for price, right? And you know, this is the first time in a couple months where we've come back into this region, so seeing a rejection from here was to be expected. So I do have some bids back down towards this $100,350 level. I think this makes a good place for BTC to hold on the higher time frame, and I will leave my limits open despite what I talk about today. I think overall 100k seems like a really nice place to become a buyer for BTC, especially on the spot side of things. I think you could swing along into 100k with a target of selling into June, maybe even into late summer, depending how we react on other indexes and how risk assets start acting going into summer. But as of right now, I think you could probably look at buying, if possible, into 100k. We have the developing yearly value area high, we have the 2025 Q1 value area high, so the prior quarterly value area high, 2024 Q4 value area high. We also have the developing quarterly value area high, we have the developing monthly VWAP, and then along with that, right, we're just going to sweep some stacked up lows that we have under here. You have 100k, which is a big psychological number, right? 100k, you know, when you work your way up, like you got 10, 1, 10, 100, like those sort of numbers, they all add some sort of effect to price, whether that's coming from below it or above it. Big psychological numbers tend to have a reaction. So that's another reason why I'm willing to be a buyer at 100k, because I think psychologically that's a pretty important place for buyers to be interested in, and buyers will likely step in there. So sweeping of these lows is the best scenario right now, but if we look at prior trends from BTC, it often doesn't give that perfect sweep, especially when it locks in some really strong bullish conditions. So we can see on the move up so far that we have been doing this price action. We can see back in the start of the move, you know, we sort of stack up these lows, and then what happens is you don't sort of get any like SFPs, swing failure patterns below these lows, and it makes it really difficult to try and get an entry. We could see the move up from our range last year in November, it done the exact same, right? You know, sort of get these micro movements where we do get a sweep, right? We can see we got a sweep here, but overall the sort of like swing structure side of things, the daily structure, it doesn't offer much to get into price action, right? Especially in these strong trending conditions. That was the range break back in November and December. Then you got the February and March range break, right? It done the exact same thing. We can see, you know, didn't offer much of a sweep of lows, and it makes it really difficult to people to get into a position. And then again, the October-November break 2023, we can see the exact same thing. Stacked up lows and not a lot of opportunity to get into any positions. So we have to be prepared for a scenario where we do not sweep into 100k before we see a breakout into new all-time highs in price discovery. So that's what I want to talk about now. So you got this composite volume profile. So this is made up of 10 days over this current month. We can see if we reset the profile, you can see how when we merge these profiles, it offers a composite profile instead of just the individual profiles. So these composites can act as a good place and a level of interest to become a buyer. For example, as long as price is trading within this composite, we should assume that market is in a bracketing environment. But we have seen a pretty nice break from this composite so far this week, going into the daily close. Yesterday, again, we sort of got that daily close pump. I do think that if we get a drop in towards this 104, this 104k area, right, we have the composite value area high, and then we also have the composite POC. I think this makes a really good place to look for some continuation from BTC. And I think if we are going to see a breakout this week towards all-time high and fresh monthly highs, then I think this is a pretty important place for us to hold in terms of value. I think if we fail to hold into this 104,500, into this 104k area, then there's probably a good chance that we shoot completely out the other side, right? And we go for that 101k sweep, because I think now we've had 1-2 stabs at the high. I think this was, for us to break out this week, I think we should continue to hold 104. Otherwise, I would probably look to full exit my spot positions that I have from the lows and rebuy back down towards that area we spoke of earlier in the report, in the video, right? That 100k region, even as low as sort of like 99 to 98k is very possible. But for continuation this week, I'm going to look at 104k. I'm going to look for some triggers using sort of standard order flow to get some long triggers into 104k, and if we see some good signs of reversal, then I'll be willing to be a buyer, right? An earlier buyer than what I was saying. So this is what I mean by trying to be aggressive here. And logically speaking, if we do hold into 104k, then we probably look at breaking out this week. And then, if we fail to hold here, as I said, and we start to consolidate and get trapped under there, then I think there's a pretty good chance of shooting out and filling my bids at 100k. Overall, I don't see much reason to be bearish here on BTC. The only reason I would be bearish and decide to change my bias to seeing new highs in May and rallying into June would be if we lock in a big deviation up here, right? So if we get stuck underneath that 102 to 100k region, I think there's a good chance that if this locks in a deviation, then we probably run back down to 90s and maybe even 88s looking in towards the summer months. As of right now, we should assume that this sort of consolidation under resistance is probably going to end up in being expansion. But the question is, when is the expansion going to come? And I think if it is going to come this week, it's going to come from this 104k region. And like I said, if we don't hold here, then back to chop and probably end up shooting out the other side towards these lows, right? So Ethereum, this is something I'm actually currently long, but if I don't see a breakout within the next few hours, probably into the New York session, I'm actually going to look to exit my position. I think Ethereum has good potential from here. It put in a nice reclaim back above this 2500 region, and I want to look for a move towards maybe 2800 to 3k this week, especially if BTC holds 104. I think Ethereum looks good for a move up. Nice deviation, nice reclaim, like I said, of that 2500 region. I think if we sort of reject here on the higher time frame, then 2200 to 2k looks good. I'm sort of playing the lower time frame around this higher time frame level. The monthly has some work to do, to be honest. The monthly and weekly on Ethereum has some work to do. A good chance of a bearish retest if we don't see a move up over the next sort of a couple of weeks into the end of May into June. I think we're at risk of putting in a bearish retest of ETH, and like I said, probably forming fresh lows into 2200 to 2k. So this ETH position, it's more of an intraday, intra-week position. I'm not looking to mass swing this, and I'll probably exit if we fail to hold like 2500 to low 2400 over today and tomorrow, especially if BTC fails to sort of get that breakout like I just spoke of. Talking about the dollar now, I've spoken about the dollar a lot and the potential of a big bearish trend and how it can be positive for risk assets. I'm going to keep a close eye on this. The dollar put in a bearish retest of 101, which I actually really like. I think if we can lock in a sweep back below 99, $100 on the DXY, there's probably a good chance of seeing a bearish retest back down to like 94, even as low as 91 over the next few months. And we can see previously when the dollar locked in this sort of deviation and bearish trend. It trended down for around almost 300 days each time. Meanwhile, BTC went on to do that final leg up and final rally of the cycle, right? And we can see so far how BTC has reacted. So important to keep an eye on the dollar and how the DXY reacts. We had some news coming out yesterday, of inflation, debt fears, recession fears, and all of this will have a large impact on the DXY. So it's probably important to keep an eye on the DXY, and this will have a good effect on risk assets over the next few weeks. Final thing I want to talk about here is the global money supply. So the M2 chart. I've spoke about this a couple of times in my YouTube videos and along with streams and write-ups and things like that. But pretty much what happens is the M2 right here is the money supply growth of the top 21 central banks, and we've got this pinned against the price of BTC. So a lot of the time what happens when the M2 reaches new highs, we see BTC tend to follow. At least when the M2 sees a local top, we see BTC follow that by about 2 months. So we can see the M2 topped in April 2023. Following that, BTC made new highs and topped in July, right? So about 2 months following the M2 topping, BTC topped. Again here, the M2 topping in December 2023, BTC goes on to top in March 2024. Again here we saw the M2 top in September 2024. BTC went on to put in a local top in December 2024, right? So again, September to December, around 3 months. And now again, we're seeing the M2 looking at making new highs and continues to make new highs, right? BTC bottomed into April and now we are trailing it. So if we're looking at a local top on the M2 very soon, then we could see BTC potentially rallying for another 2 months, putting us towards June, July. So overall, something to really pay attention to right now. And this has been a very good tool to use over the past couple of years on the higher time frame, and I think we're going to continue to see BTC make new highs pre-summer. So that's it for this week's market review. I actually don't have too much to comment about on altcoins this week. I'm risk off altcoins as of right now, and I'm mostly focusing on ETH and BTC. I sold most of my alt spot bags last week, sold 100% on a couple of them, and then exited 50% on most of my other altcoin bags, if not all of them, that I bought from back in March, April time. Overall, I think I remain risk off altcoins until we see BTC sort of break above 106k. I think if BTC can break above 106 and, following an all-time high break, start to leg up, this is the sort of time you want to start positioning into altcoins. I think if we see a strong break above all-time high on BTC, I think altcoins can go ballistic. Historically, when BTC has traded into fresh all-time high and price discovery, that has been the time to look at going full-on risk on altcoins. As of right now, I remain risk off altcoins, focusing on BTC, focusing on majors, and I will look to rebuy back into alts when we get a significant move from majors. That was it for this week's market review. Socials are linked below, link to the Discord link below, sharing trades, streams, ideas, everything in the Wealth Fruit Discord. And I will see you guys on Thursday for my Charting from Blank episode. Have a good week. Bye bye.